from our wedding vows. And we started doing this very specifically because Lisa had a pretty extensive fall. She fell from, was it a second story ladder? And crushed her skull and has a bad titanium plate, traumatic brain injury, and some of the symptoms of post-traumatic brain injury were just bothering her. You know, it was a struggle. She was trying to cope with a lot of them, and there's not a lot of treatment options out there for the symptoms of traumatic brain injury. So we started looking into it, and we learned about lion's mane. So I was like, oh, we can grow lion's mane on the counter in the kitchen. This is gonna be great. I'll buy a bag of mushrooms and we will grow this and it will be good for her. And within like 3 months, I was completely obsessed with mushrooms and microgreens. We had an entire room in our home converted to grow them. We were growing 10 different kinds. It spiraled very quickly at mushrooms. Funny, we're funny. So basically, what we do is we focus on superfoods and making healthy products out of them. So we're a pretty small farm. We have about a quarter of an acre lot that we grow on. We grow them in a shipping container that we've insulated and climate controlled. So basically, in addition to growing those fresh mushrooms and microgreens for sale for you guys to eat or take home and do whatever you like with, we also craft them into products. So we do educational stuff, we make products, and kind of work on educating the community onto how to more easily incorporate superfoods into your diet. And superfoods, they're just nutrient-dense foods. It's kind of a catchy phrase that doesn't really technically mean a whole lot, biologically speaking, but basically it's a hyper-nutrient-dense food. So they've got micronutrients that'll boost your body's ability to function in some way. So there's dozens of types that can be considered superfoods, from like avocados to goji berries, turmeric, all of that stuff. We became really fascinated specifically with the properties of mushrooms and microgreens, so we're focusing on those in our farm. So what do we grow? We grow a rotating crop of microgreens. Some of the ones that we have basically every single week are sunflower, broccoli, radish, and kale. I find those are super accessible. They're very tasty. You can put them on nearly anything. But we also grow some specialty ones to order for local restaurants or just for local clients. So we will also grow popcorn microgreens, which are absolutely wild. They stay yellow and they grow in the dark the whole time. And they taste sweet like sugar. Like when you put those in your mouth, it is like you're eating a dessert, not a plant. It is very wild. And then we also grow arugula, cilantro, pea shoots, wheatgrass, and just a variety of other random microgreens. So a lot of people haven't actually heard of microgreens, or they think, is this a microgreen, is this a sprout, is this a baby leaf? So basically, microgreens are great because they are a way to incorporate vegetables, and you are getting about 40% more of the phytonutrients, which are just plant nutrition, than their full-grown versions. So if you're eating, say, an ounce of broccoli microgreens, it's pretty similar to eating close to a cup of actual broccoli. So you're getting quite a bit more and not having to just sit there and slog through cups and cups and cups of vegetables to get that vitamins and minerals. All microgreens are very high in vitamin K and fiber. Those are two elements that are really helpful in managing blood pressure and keeping your blood pressure and your heart healthy. Broccoli especially is my favorite, so I'm talking about it more. But it's very high in sulforaphane, which, please forgive me, I read all of these words, I never hear them pronounced, so I'm probably saying most of them wrong. It's a compound that a lot of early research is showing can help fight against cancers. It's in a lot of the brassicas, so like broccoli, cabbage, all of those things will have that in there, Brussels sprouts, things like that. Microgreens also serve as an important prebiotic material. That's what helps your gut biome stay healthy. And there's a lot of research coming out these days that is showing that your gut biome is not just the key to a very healthy body, but it's also the key to your mental health. It's how you process and all your precursors for the things that your body needs to stay healthy and do its job. And a lot of times we just don't get enough prebiotics or probiotics into our general diet. So this is an easy way to incorporate just a punch of that on a daily basis without having to work too hard for it. They're an amazing dietary source of antioxidants and polyphenols, both of which are linked in different studies to a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. Also, they all taste incredible. I don't know if anyone's ever had a sunflower microgreen here, but they are crisp, they are nutty, they are delicious. The broccoli is just fresh, and it doesn't have that intensity of the sulfur smell. Like, you know, if you cook broccoli and your whole house kind of smells like feet for a little while, it's not like that. It's delicious, it's fresh, it's bright, and you still get all of those nutritional benefits from it. So people always, every week at the farmer's market where we sell these, they're like, well, what do you do with this? You can do nearly anything with them. We put them on almost everything we eat. We discovered that the only ones that are good on ice cream are popcorn greens, so don't put them on ice cream, but just about anything else you can do. So when we make scrambled eggs or any egg dish in the mornings, we put a handful on there. You know, the famous millennial avocado toast, delicious on top of avocado toast. We put them on all of our sandwiches. Any salads we make boosts that nutrition of the salad, which is good for you to begin with. We do a lot of crock pot dishes because we are very busy, so they actually go really, really well on top of any crock pot dish, stir fries. There's a ton of ways that you can make those accessible in your diet on a day-to-day basis. They're also very fun to grow. So if you have kids or grandkids and you want to do a project together, it's a really, really good way to introduce your family into growing their own food, which can really help increase their interest in actually eating vegetables and greens. Because if you're just growing a small amount, you can grow these on your, turned it off, great. There we go. You can grow these on your kitchen counter. So you can see there's a couple different ways up here that technology near enough, friends. That you can basically see the differences in, you can grow them in little glass jars, you can grow them in leftover containers, like little strawberry containers. You can grow them in any little plastic Tupperware dishes that you have. But the way that they grow best is in that center thing right there. Those are the double trays. So that's how we grow them for commercial growing. If you want to grow a large amount and make sure that they all stay like pretty evenly watered and very healthy and strong, those are the best trays to get them. They come in 10 by 20 or 10 by 10s, and basically you will fill them with your planting medium and then water them from the bottom. So basically, if you're going to try this at home, you can get seeds super easily on the internet now. It used to be really challenging to get the high germination rate that you need for microgreen seeds because they need to be germination rates in the 90%. Otherwise, you have all these dead seeds in the bottom of your tray, and it's just going to grow mold, and nobody wants to eat mold. So basically, you will start off with one of the trays right there, like that. You'll fill it with the medium. Hey, there, I figured it out. So you fill it with your medium. Our farm uses cocoa core, super easy to get. You can buy it in little bricks, you can buy it in big bricks, and you just hydrate it until you squeeze it and no water comes out. So you just want it lightly damp but not wet. And then take whatever seeds you want to grow and you just sprinkle them along the top in like a carpet. It's not like you're planting tomatoes where you want every couple inches, 1 or 2 seeds. You plant them so that the seeds are close to touching. You want it just all the way through. And then in general, you take a spray bottle and spritz them so that the seeds themselves are damp and stick to the dirt. You don't cover them in the dirt. You don't have to do basically anything else except for encourage them to germinate. So seeds have that little hard coating along them, and basically when you're growing microgreens, you want to make sure that their roots are really strong and their stems are really strong because they are growing all together, and you want to make sure that you're getting the healthiest, strongest plant that you can get because you're going to be eating them. So you want that good crunch and a good, strong baby plant. So we put them into weighted germination. You can see just right there. You stack the trays up on top of each other and you put a couple that'll sit there, it'll make their roots strong and go straight down into that cocoa core. And then if you leave them too long, you'll notice that they will be strong enough to actually push that weight right off of the trays. They will grow up and knock it right on the ground if you forget about them for a couple of days. So depending on the seeds, most trays stay in weighted germination for 3 days. Some stay all the way up to 7 or 8 days. That's mostly for more specialty crops. So what you're growing at home is 3 days is usually good. And then as soon as they're germinated, you can do one of two things. You can put them directly on your kitchen windowsill, or like in our grow room, we have just stacks of shelving units with the LED grow lights on them. So we put them right in there so that they just go directly under light, and then over the next 3 to 7 days, they grow about 4 inches long, and you'll see them, they'll be beautiful. You harvest them as soon as they start to show their first true leaves, or right before the true leaves show up, depending on if you want them like big and leafy or closer to like the 2-inch long ones. Some people will put them into what's considered a blackout period, and for some crops like basil, you absolutely need that. We don't grow basil anymore because it's very, very picky. So that's just to make the stems stretch. So like if you don't put basil into a blackout period, your plant is going to be this big in 3 weeks, and you're never going to be able to harvest it without getting all the dirt off of it. You can put regular ones into a blackout period, especially if you're just growing on a kitchen windowsill, because they don't get enough light to really boost themselves up really high from just a regular windowsill light. That indirect light doesn't really get them there. So you can put a little tray right on the top of them upside down until they're about 1 inch or 2 tall. They stretch for the light, and then you take that tray off and they'll green up and become actual edible plants thereafter. And then microgreens are nice because even the long crops are ready to harvest maybe 21 days after you plant them. The vast majority of microgreens that we grow are ready to harvest in 6 to 10 days. So you can have awesome fresh microgreens usually within a week, which is a fun task, especially for kids that may not have a lot of waiting ability. You know, it's not like planting tomatoes where it's 3 months later and you might get 1 tomato. So that's basically it. The microgreens are a lot more straightforward. They were kind of a fun addition to our crops. We'll take them and make dehydrated powders out of them and add them to smoothies and different things like that. So you can eat them fresh or you can dry them. But our main passion is mushrooms. So right now, over the course of the year, we grow 10 different types of mushrooms. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with edible versus what's more considered medicinal mushrooms. But our edible mushrooms are pink oysters, golden oysters, blue oysters, and Italian oysters. They all have differences in texture, but they have the same nutritional properties. So like the Italian oysters are these big, meaty, flat caps. The golden oysters, or you can see them here in the corner, they're very delicate, a little bit more of a like gentle taste, not quite so earthy. The pink oysters have the strongest taste to me. They are just beautiful and like rich flavors and big old like fronds almost. They look like flowers to me, so you can see they grow in these beautiful clusters from those bags right there. So we also grow king trumpets, but those are only winter mushrooms because they will not fruit at all unless it is 55 degrees, and I cannot keep our container 55 degrees in a Kentucky summer when the heat index is 115. So then we grow lion's mane year-round and shiitakes year-round. I wanted to bring in, just so you guys could see a little bit better what they look like. These are some sample bags that we're sacrificing. Normally we keep them in a reasonably sterile environment, but this is the spawn bag and for shiitake, so you can see the mycelium grows white there. And shiitakes are just fun to look at because most mushroom blocks grow smooth, but they get these weird popcorns all over them, and that's what will eventually become the mushroom, is those weird little popcorns all over the sides of them. So if you want to, you guys can come up and look at those when we're all done. So then the medicinal ones that we grow are more like cauliflower, turkey tail, and reishi. You wouldn't want to eat those. They're woody and chewy and kind of strange. Lots of people do love the cauliflower, but I So they are the reproductive structure that some of the fungi produce. Not every fungi produces a mushroom, but every mushroom is a fungi. So they're similar or equivalent to like the fruit of a plant or a tree. And they reproduce by dropping spores. So you can see, you always want to harvest your mushrooms before they drop spores, because you can see up here, look at these little icicle formations here. Those are the spore drop from different oyster mushrooms. And if you're just growing them on your kitchen counter, it's no big deal, you just wipe those up. But when you're growing them commercially, if you let the spore drop, it can actually cause respiratory distress because it drops a huge load of spores into your container. So we harvest them before they get to this stage, usually. So basically those spores come from the fruiting body, and they'll travel until they find a favorable grow environment, and then they will form a mycelial network. And they'll form that either underground or inside of a tree. Some mushrooms actually colonize other animals or decomposing organic matter. They can colonize a lot of things. The mycelial structure can live for hundreds of years. They can form absolutely gigantic networks underground. If you walk outside in your yard and you suddenly see a ring of mushrooms pop up that wasn't there the day before in a big old circle that's like 20 feet across, underneath that whole circle, that's the mycelial network. You're just seeing the edge of them popping up and forming those fruiting bodies. Mushrooms themselves, they usually pop up and die pretty quickly, but that mycelial network will stay there for years. There's one fungus that's found in eastern Oregon that used to be considered the largest single organism on Earth. It's 2,384 acres. That is 1,665 football fields. And they estimate it to be at least 2,400 years old. There's a couple people that think it could be as old as 8,000 years old. So they really can live a long time. So there are dozens of ways to grow mushrooms. Everything from really, right? really funny, goofy tries. So these are just, I belong to a bunch of mushroom growing network groups, so these are just funny things that people do for fun with their mushrooms. So this is somebody growing them on their old running shoes. And this is someone who decided to grow oyster mushrooms out of one of their daughter's stuffed animals that she didn't want anymore. And then they can grow in buckets, they can be on logs, you can make a compost bed. I've known people that grow them out of laundry baskets stacked with pasteurized straw, and then they just fruit out of those little edges of the laundry basket. I joke that oyster mushrooms will colonize literally anything. If you stand still long enough, they will colonize you too. We had some when we were first growing and we were putting our stuff into one of those rotating compost bins. We were throwing away all of our old blocks when they were done fruiting. We would throw them into that compost bin and add it to our soil later. And I came out one day after not having turned the compost bin for several days, and they were growing off the plastic of the compost bin. And I was like, you're not, what, how? So they really will grow on just about anything. So you can go as low tech as you want, you can go as high tech as you want. Ours, we specifically grow in one of the higher tech, more labor intensive ways, specifically because we are a commercial farm. So the difference between low tech log inoculations or compost beds is, with those, you wait until the mushrooms are ready. So you might inoculate a dozen logs with shiitake dowels and wait 18 months before you see a mushroom from those. And then you might get a couple pounds and you'll get a handful of flushes. You might want to look at them, 2 days after the rain, they'll pop up, or when it's the perfect temperature for them, they'll pop up. You might get them for a couple of years. Same with like sawdust beds, and then that pasteurized straw technique that you can do either in buckets or baskets or anything you want. Those will grow great. Most people that grow for themselves do that bucket tech with the pasteurized straw. It's super easy, you really don't need much in the way of equipment for that, but you don't get regular or large yields. So for us, we use what's called bag tech. So that allows us to control for fruiting, and it allows us to create a very sterile environment so that our mushrooms don't have to compete with outside contaminants. So So mushrooms growing outside, they're competing with trichoderma, they're competing with other fungi, they're competing with the local mushroom population that's already on those logs. So basically they just have to outcompete things. Whereas our mushrooms, you can go from agar plate to fruiting body in 4 weeks, and you get a really regular crop. So we know that as soon as I have a colonized block and I put it into the fruiting chamber, we will have mushrooms, depending on the species of the bag that we're growing, we will have mushrooms within a certain set amount of time. So we can really predict and rotate through our crops so that we know every week we're gonna have this many mushrooms. So we grow ours in sterilized substrate bags. That is sawdust and wheat bran in this one right there. Thank you, Dan. So basically, you'll have a baseline. It's just a sawdust that you hydrate. We pack those blocks before you inoculate them into a pressure cooker, and we will sterilize those for 2.5 hours in a pressure cooker. That makes sure that everything that's in there is not alive. And so once they're sterilized, you take the grain bags, which we've done a lot of different types of grains. You can grow it on anything from millet to rye. You can use popcorn. I personally prefer organic oats. They just need to grow faster on those for us, but that's personal preference. You'll take those bags right there. You will go up to, for us, we use a laminar flow hood, which is basically just a piece of equipment that allows you to have a sterile flow of air coming through. So it comes through a HEPA filter, so you can work under it in reasonably sterile conditions. Not hospital sterile, but you know that you're getting what you're working with and not outside air contaminants. So you'll cut open one of those bags after you disinfect them with isopropyl alcohol, and you'll pour spawn from that bag into the other sterilized bag. And then you mix them up, you seal them with an impulse sealer, and you take them out to the fruiting chamber to colonize. So basically, we start with our agar plates. This is not actually one of mine because mine never look this pretty because I don't dye my agar. But this is a friend of mine's agar plate. So you can see this is what you're shooting for when you're growing mushrooms from agar. That's called rhizomorphic growth. So you can see all those strong, awesome, roby tendrils of the mushrooms, of the mycelial network rather. So that shows you that it is a clean grow, that there's no contaminants in that plate. You can take that whole plate and put it into a bag of grain, and it will colonize that grain. So that's where you start. You start with pouring agar plates. If you're doing it our way, you can buy kits, you can do all kinds of things. But pour agar plates, and then you inoculate spores onto those, and you clean up those agar plates by doing periodic transfers once it grows until your plates look more like that. Once they're fully colonized and transmitted out there, our fruiting chamber has 90% humidity, and it is about, we try to keep it at 70 degrees, even with our climate control system. Sometimes Kentucky just doesn't like you to be 70 degrees inside no matter what you do. But we keep it between 70 and 75 degrees in the summer. And once they're out there, they will start forming these pins right here. So you can see they look like little lips. They start forming little pins, and each one of these is going to be a mushroom eventually. So once they start forming pins, usually 3 to 4 days later, you have a mature mushroom that you can harvest off that bag with a sharp knife and eat or dehydrate or do whatever you want with it. So then, mushrooms have a lot of benefits. This is why we started doing this in the first place. There's quite a few peer-reviewed studies on their different benefits. There needs to be so many more studies, more wider studies, more human trials, but it's just not being done as much as I would like to see it being done. But there are quite a few indicators of benefits, both to people and to your pets. So all mushrooms, even a button mushroom that you buy from the grocery store and throw into your stir fry or your quiche, they are very high in beta-glucans. And that beta-glucans are a type of soluble fiber. It's got really beneficial effects on heart health, blood pressure, cholesterol. It can boost your immunity. There's evidence that it may reduce inflammatory markers. It can help stabilize your blood sugar levels, and it's just generally, you want to include a lot of beta-glucans as part of your healthy diet. But some mushrooms have very specific specific compounds in them that do other fun things. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. And lion's mane is kind of my favorite mushroom. It's my baby. That's why we started growing them. That's the one that we started learning about first. And it has two compounds. They have carcinogens and arenosines. And studies show that these two compounds work very well at stimulating growth of nerve and brain cells. So those studies are mostly done on like tissue samples and mice and things like that, but there are some studies that show that it may help with actual human trial subjects as well. Like people that will be in the study will be taking that for a few things, and they will have their symptoms improve. There needs to be so many more, but there are some out there already. So utilizing lion's mane at a regular basis, consuming it often, or taking it as an extracted powder, putting it in your coffee, different things that we make the products from, could help with memory loss. It can help prevent the neuronal damage that comes with those amyloid beta plaques buildups that happen when you're dealing with Alzheimer's disease. It's also just delicious. Like, it tastes wonderful. You can utilize it as a substitute for crab in almost any recipe, which I don't know if any of you have ever tried to buy crab this past year, but it is $40 a pound, so it's a great substitute right now. And then another one that we grow that has really well-studied properties is the turkey tail mushroom. These are amazing mushrooms. You can't really eat them because they are woody and chewy, but they have a lot of beneficial antioxidants in them. There's studies showing that it helps fortify your immune system. There's studies that are showing that it's one of a specific type of mushrooms that will really help fortify your gut bacteria and maintain a healthy microbiome. And there are multiple studies showing that it supports the treatment of certain cancers. Specifically because of these two compounds that it has in there, they're called polysaccharopeptides, specifically one called Crestin, which is abbreviated as PSK, and one that is polysaccharide peptide, which is PSP. They're very commonly used in Asia as anti-cancer agents, and they're used in combination with surgery or chemotherapy and radiation. And there's a lot of studies showing that they shrink the size of cancerous tumors. They also promote an immune response in your body, so they can help you fight things that are causing you illness, and they suppress inflammatory markers in your body, which is amazing. Half of the things that are wrong with us start with inflammation. And then our main guy is oyster mushrooms. They're incredibly versatile. You can eat them in so many ways. They stand up really well to being deep fried. You can tempura batter them. You can saute them. You can make mushroom jerky out of them. You can put them on pizzas, sauces, anything that you can even remotely think to do with a mushroom, you can use oyster mushrooms for those. Plus they taste incredible if you like mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are neat because they are one of the only sources out there that contains this very specific amino acid called ergothioneine, which I'm probably saying wrong and I apologize. So this organism, that amino acid, of course, occurs in very few organisms. If you're trying to get it from your diet, it's mostly red and black beans, oat bran, and mushrooms, specifically oyster mushrooms. So it's something that the human body is born with. You have a high amount of it when you're young, and it begins to decrease throughout your body as we age. So it is showing some potential for protection against neurodegenerative diseases as well, and it's one of the few compounds that we know of that can pass the blood-brain barrier, which is amazing. So it is, they think that one of the reasons that it can help protect your brain is specifically because it's an amino acid that can actually get to your brain, whereas a lot of things that are medicines never pass the blood-brain barrier. And there are several studies that have shown that consuming oyster mushrooms or their powders on a daily basis can reduce your blood sugar by up to 22% post-meals. And it may also lower your LDL cholesterol and as well as your blood So what do we make with our mushrooms? We make fun stuff with our mushrooms. So I recognize that mushrooms are like a relatively controversial food source. Like, how many people here actually hate them? No? Hey, there you go, couple. So, even for us, I love them, but trying to eat like a quarter pound of various mushrooms every single day for their health benefits is tedious at best. So there's a lot of ways you can fix them to kind of trick yourself into them. If you buy our king trumpets in the winter, this looks like scallops, but it's actually king trumpet stems. So you can saute them up and make them taste like and look like scallops in your scallop dishes. You can make crab cakes from the lion's mane. This is not my recipe, the other ones were, but this is just a flatbread pizza. I couldn't find, we made a beautiful fig and mushroom pizza for this, but I can't find the pictures of it. So you can make it on pizza. However, like I said, it can get really tedious to try to eat mushrooms all the time. So basically what we do is we make several different products to make those mushrooms and microgreens a lot more accessible to you. So some of what we make, we brought just so you can look at them if you want to. We make a mushroom coffee. So we make hot chocolate, we make mushroom powders, we make seasoning salts that combine our dehydrated mushrooms and microgreens along with Himalayan pink sea salt. We make amazing French chocolate truffles that are infused with our mushroom powders. They actually won first place at the Calgary City Chocolate and Coffee Festival. And then we also make dog treats. So we, at home, we give our mushroom powders to our pets as well, in hopes that it will help them live forever. We'll see. But we also infuse dog treats with them. So basically what we'll do is we have a dual extraction process. So once we've harvested our mushrooms, anything that we're not selling fresh, so usually anything that's a little ugly, because sometimes mushrooms don't know how they're supposed to grow, so they'll grow and they'll look a little funny. So when they look a little funny and they're not like perfect market clusters, then they look like beautiful and attractive, we'll take those and we dehydrate them. So we dehydrate them, and then after they're dehydrated, we grind those into a powder, and that powder gets into a dual extraction process. So once it's powdered, they go into containers that are filled with a high proof alcohol, usually like a 100 proof vodka or something like that. And they are extracted in that alcohol for 4 to 6 weeks, and then those mushrooms are strained out, and then they're extracted in a hot water bath, usually at 108-ish degrees. It varies a little bit depending on the mushroom, for somewhere between 3 and 48 hours. And so once those two extractions are finished, they are combined together and then concentrated. So we take the extracted liquid from those mushrooms, and we concentrate it down about 50%. So we very carefully evaporate all that alcohol off and get it nice and concentrated. And then that is mixed with a rice starch. That's just the one that we found after many, many, many months of very gross experiments that will actually powder and dissolve into your drinks and your baked goods. So once that is mixed with that, it is dehydrated again, and then we blend that into a powder. So that powder is what we sell in these little bags here. So it's a highly concentrated extract of our different mushrooms. So basically, you can take those and you can stir them into hot chocolate, you can stir them into your own coffee at home. They have very little flavor, so they don't really affect the taste of your goods and stuff. With the exception of, I did mix some of this into a really lovely hot, like peach and passion fruit tea that I have. Don't put it in fruit tea. Fruit tea is a no. Literally everything else I've tried it in, though, it doesn't seem to affect the flavor very much. Black teas, more earthy herbal teas. We blend ours into our smoothies every day, along with microgreens and other things. So that just makes it really accessible. And then we take that, sometimes we do it into the dissolvable powder, and sometimes, depending on what the client is looking for, sometimes we will keep all of that mushroom substrate. It's called the marc, which is just the ground up mushrooms, the whole fruiting body. We'll keep that in the liquid and evaporate all that liquid completely off, and blend that mushroom into a pure powder where it's including the fruiting bodies instead of just the dissolvable compounds. That is what we use in our coffee because you can brew that like tea, and we also sell little packets of those. You just can't blend that into something. You have to like kind of like swallow it in a teaspoon of yogurt or something because it's crunchy and it's not very useful. So I like the powders that are dissolvable because you get about 90% of the compounds as you do from the full body fruiting body mushrooms. It's just a much more accessible way to utilize them. And I just think that it is really a wonderful addition to your diet. And I could talk about mushrooms for like 45 more minutes. But that's kind of just a really good general overview of not only what we do, but why and why it's good for you. And I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Do you sell your product commercially?
We sure do, yeah. We rent a commercial kitchen and we sell it at the farmer's market every Saturday. Or I should have brought cards, that would have been so smart. But I can also give you my number and you can text us anytime. We do direct farm pickup most days.
Okay.
So we're just on 11th and Monroe. We're a pretty hyper local farm and we let people come by. We can't really take you through the fruiting chamber. We're regulated by the Department of Agriculture, but you can come by and see the outside of it and get whatever you like. Yes?
I'm just curious. I'm fascinated. What did you say your background is?
Oh, my background is actually a little varied, but I have a degree in biology from the University of Illinois, and then I basically never used it until now. So I immediately went on to become a veterinary technician for 10 years, and then as much as I loved that job, it was absolutely wonderful. It pays no dollars. So when I moved to Chicago, I switched careers because I couldn't make ends meet up there. So I do massage therapy, which is actually my real full-time job here. So, anybody else?
Do you have a website?
We don't. We do have a Facebook page and an Etsy store. But as you might have noticed from my struggle to get just this PowerPoint to work, I'm very bad at technology. So I have not yet designed a website for us. Yes?
So how much of those powders, like say cup of coffee? So
Half a teaspoon.
half a teaspoon?
Yep. And each half a teaspoon of the powders we have not done third-party testing yet. That's on our goals for next year so that we will know exactly how much percentage of beta-glucans we have and different compounds in there. But based on our process, there is about 1,000 milligrams of mushroom extract in every teaspoon, in every half teaspoon, of those mushroom powders. So it's very expensive to do third-party testing right now, but we are going to get that done by the time we open next year because I want to know how close my estimate was. Yes?
Okay, this might be a dumb question. When
Never.
you're talking about the mushrooms grown, in the bag, do they literally just pop out of the bag?
Well, it depends. If you're growing chicken of the woods, they will grow out of the filter patch, but I've never succeeded in growing chicken of the woods. So what we'll do is, you see they're wrapped and tightly pushed down. When they're growing the mycelial network, you want them exposed to some of their air so that they colonize as quickly. So this will make carbon dioxide in there that'll evaporate out the filter pouch, but you can see that originally this was almost vacuum sealed, and it kind of makes its own off gases. When they're getting ready to fruit, this one's pretty close, we tape those really tight. Shiitake is a little different, I probably should have brought a different one. But a normal mushroom, you would cut one slit in that bag, and they would fruit out of the slit of the bag. This, you will wait, shiitake is such a weird mushroom. You will wait until all of these things turn this disgusting brown and start weeping really gross looking liquid. And then you take the whole thing out of the bag and it drips all over you and you put it on the shelves and then it fruits out. But it's the only one that you expose the whole block of. Usually you just cut a little slit in it. Anybody else have any questions?
So, when you do the extraction, the reason you do that instead of just dehydrating and grounding up, because the ground up doesn't dissolve?
So the ground up mushrooms don't dissolve. Also, just pure dehydration doesn't do a very good job of breaking down the chitin that is in the walls of the mushrooms. I probably should have said this earlier when I was talking about cooking them, but in general, mushrooms you really wanna cook very well. Like, you wanna cook almost every mushroom for at least 10 minutes. Some of them you need to cook significantly longer than that. Otherwise, they can give you a little bit of gastrointestinal distress. Because there's a lot of chitin in their walls, there's a lot of undigestible plant matter in there. So the extraction process is more to make sure that all of those beneficial compounds are bioavailable to your body instead of just kind of going straight through you.
It's a good idea to eat, to cook all mushrooms, including the buttons.
Yeah,
People put
cook them
in
an extra
salads.
long time. Don't eat mushrooms raw. It's bad for you. Yes.
How do you buy them? Do you buy them by the quart, by the pound?
We usually sell them by the half pound or the pound. Most of them are $10 for a half pound. You'll see, a half pound is a lot of mushrooms. So basically, this pink cluster right there is yay sized in real life, and that's about a half a pound of mushrooms. Yes.
How long would that half a pound last?
So it varies. If you come to the farm and you get it the second that we pick it and you take it home and put it in a nice paper bag in your fridge and you just ignore it, the pink oysters and the golden oysters have the shortest shelf life, so they'll only stay good for between 3 to 5 days. They just get dry after that, so you can still cook them, they're just not as tasty. The blue oysters and the king oysters and stuff like that, they'll stay good in your fridge for a week or maybe even 10 days. Anybody else? Yeah,
Most of us have probably bought the canned mushrooms at the grocery store.
absolutely.
So, but you're not very started out and you very nutritional. So what's your opinion or what do you know about them?
So canned anything, you're gonna lose some nutrition just from the canning process. But the nice thing about mushrooms, having those high beta glucans, that's one of the things you don't lose from the canning and cooking process. It just becomes more bioavailable. So you're not gonna get a ton of micronutrients from that, but you're gonna get pretty good fiber and you're gonna get a lot of those beta glucans too. I don't know exactly how much is lost in that process or anything, but yeah, they're still, just about any way you can access them, they're still a reasonably healthy food choice.
If you have environmental questions, you can ask me, because I'm the finance.
Yeah, she does all the electrical, she does all of the, the build outs, she does all of the insulation, she does all the hard work. Yes.
Where is your farm?
It's on 11th and Monroe.
It's downtown.
Yeah, so please don't judge the fact that I have not weeded the front beds in a while when you come by and check it out. But there's a beautiful mural fence there, and we built some raised garden beds. Over the course of the next year, we're going to expand into a couple of more products, including edible flowers and turmeric root and goji berries. So we're going to be expanding out a few more products as well. We were going to do that this year, but instead we adopted a very high maintenance dog.
We actually give our turkey tail mushroom
Yes.
powders too, because
She has a huge tumor in her ear, so we're giving her our turkey tail extract powders to hopefully shrink that. And it's about 60% smaller than when we started. Anybody else?
Which mushroom?
Turkey tail.
Oh, that's the one you don't want to eat. 'cause
No, don't eat it. It will hurt your teeth. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any last questions?
I think it needs a property.
What a great program.